So it's time for our second keynote address to be held by Richard B. Freeman. So Richard holds the Herbert Ascherman Chair in Economics at Harvard University. He is also involved in different positions at many other institutions, such as the Harvard Law School, the London School of Economics, the NBER, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and the US National Academy of Science. He has won several important awards and is generally regarded as one of the world's leading labor economists, but he has also made important contributions to the fields of the economics of science and engineering. He's been immensely productive. He has written at least 18 books, edited 23 others, and published over 300 articles. So please join me in welcoming Richard B. Freeman to the podium.
Thank you. So I want to quickly go through the facts, and some of that Franco gave, and I knew he would without ever conversing with him, gave some of the facts that I'll just quickly go through. Then I want to talk about the fears. Why is this inequality seen as a specter that's haunting us? When if you go back 40 years ago, you would have said, gee, not every country, but many countries would have said, we need more inequality because it'll give us more incentives for efforts and so on. So it's been a tremendous change. I'm going to offer two very peculiar, interesting models, and you'll see what they are. And then talk a little bit about better futures and roadmaps and some other recent things that have been happening in this. Well, the facts, this is Branko's talk at the beginning, the inequality rising within countries. I just would emphasize part of that is that the informal and irregular work persists in most countries. So that has a certain labor market dimension, and that capital's share of income has risen. In China as among other places, in pretty much most of the countries. And then across the countries, conditional on the PPPs or influenced by the PPPs or something, we have seen the income inequality falls among people, and he said that. I also would just add one additional thing that I think is quite important, is we're seeing the spread of higher education to all the major developing countries in a huge way. And that also is a movement towards equality of people. China, of course, is graduated last year, 6 million bachelor's graduates of varying quality, but China graduates inside China, not people getting educated in the West. Inside China, more PhDs than any other country. The US has been the leader in that. Again, varying quality. India has had a huge increase in university education, but we tend to ignore it because it's dwarfed by what China did. And if you eliminated China, the Indian thing would be one of the miracles of growing higher education as well. And Brazil has been very good too. So this reduction of inequality worldwide occurs not just in the income statistics, GDP things, but also in education. I just want to make a comment as to where much of this wealth or inequality comes. So you will remember the protests in the US, which certainly in our country sort of focused people. Oh my goodness. It was the upper 1%, over there, and then it's the self-proclaimed 99%. I get contacts from the Occupy Wall Street people. That group was very well educated. Many of them made good money on Wall Street. And then they go into protest things, and they're all having, as far as I can, this one's contacted me, are having pretty good careers as it is, moving they're not really part of the 99%, some deep sense. But I just want to point out, if you take the American income distribution, it's the upper 0.1%. Let's just give the little figures here. That's huge. Just fourfold, literally fourfold increase over 40 years. Then you look within the upper 0.01%. And then you look at the upper 0.001%. I got some figures here. There's some sort of a TV show. See how the top 0.001% live. And they then have a number that seems erroneous, but who knows? They claim there were over 1,000 American billionaires. The figures that Forbes publishes gives us less, but no one's quite sure how Forbes, how do you know the hidden wealth, which is Branko referred to, and how they're valuing different things. So I just give some, these are now published from the U.S. Internal Revenue Service, the top 400 U.S. taxpayers. They get 1.59%, 10% of capital gains. So we know that these people are really heavy into ownership. That's how you get to be this billionaire. And then, so that's just published figures you can get from the IRS puts that out. So that when we think about the inequality, it's really been concentrated in an extremely small number of people. I mean, the upper 10% is better than the other people and so on. But within every group, you see it becomes more and more. So this is the count of billionaires. Lower than that. This is 2014, as of the spring. The U.S. had 492, which puts us number 1. We had 8 of the top 10, so we're feeling really good about our performance in this contest. Net worth. Number 2 was China. That's pretty striking, and any of the income inequality Gini coefficients that the Chinese officially have are inconsistent with this level of billionaire status. Russia. The EU would be second if you were one country, and that again connects to what Branko in this morning laid out about how as more countries join the EU. You see this, and then I just said, Sweden. How many are there in Sweden? And that was 19. I was somewhat surprised that number of billionaires, given the Sweden with tax rates that have declined and so on. And include the number 12. You might know who he is. If you're, I've forgotten his name, but it wasn't he. And so there are people who cheer for that. On this machine that hand is not moving, it's supposed to move and go clap, 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 clap. It's not clapping right now. Okay, so we've got this massive shift of income distribution that you say, well, should we worry? Should we not? We're not worried. I'm going to be very brief too about the reasons, because I want to go to cures and ultimately that's what I like. The skill bias, technical change, ... And nowadays there's much greater, I think, evidence coming forth that has forced people who downplayed trade as a factor to now say that's part of it. And and then some people will say it's a mixture of the two. And it's hard to pin down, but I don't think you would want to deny the trade at this point. If you would, there'll be a whole bunch of people who would jump all over you with statistics about that. There's been somewhat less discussion of the capital share rising, and is that consistent? But if capital is more or less complementary with skilled labor, you can see, you might tell somewhat similar stories about technical change and so on. I was greatly impacted, or my thinking was, when China and India came in and the Soviet Union collapsed, that basically this doubled the size of the workforce available to modern capitalism, and they brought in almost no capital. Some of the Russia being the most advanced of the places, some of their production things had negative value added, and they were specialized in producing weapons, that may have had some value to somebody, etc. So we did have a huge global effect from the opening of the world. It means spread of knowledge, etc. Piccaninny's space put a great stress on the rate of return of capital being high. And that really brings the capital component into what is mostly a labor market story. And then I just put down below this, because some people could just say these factors are maybe the intermediate roots. But we do know there's been a great weakening of trade unions and a whole lot of other institutions in countries. And then there is what I'm going to put a big stress on, is the danger, and I think this ultimately will be one of the, well, why we see this as specter, is that the rich will dominate the government and they're just going to lock in. It's everything against the equality of opportunity, but my argument is through capital ownership side, less than through labor market kinds of things. And that's why I think. Then just as a fact from the US, the basic way our executives get huge amounts of pay, you read things, they're paid 500 times the average worker, It's not through their salary. It comes through capital, let me phrase it correctly, linking their income to capital. And so the green line here is options, the amount they get through options. What you see at the bottom, the blue, is the salary. The salary has not gone up all that much. And there's a reason for that, there's a tax reason, that a company that pays a salary beyond $1 million has to take that money beyond $1 million, and it pays a profits tax on that. So it is not fully treated as a cost. So of course, intelligent companies will then say, I'm not going to go beyond and pay that extra amount. So what I do is I pay you in all different other ways that are viewed as incentive pay, and incentive pay was specifically treated as a separate category. So what you see is you'll still come to any number of American executives that are paid $1 million, and then everything above that, which may just be what they would have made. They didn't have this tax kick. Maybe they'd be paid $4 million in cash, but it is tying it to capital income, and you could argue whether it should be counted as capital ownership, which indeed one of the things presumably the shareholders want them to have an ownership stake, so they align the interest, or is it just a way around the tax system? That's all. Now I want to get to the fears, because those sort of basic facts, see a little bit from American perspective, but Branko got the bulk of everything down in the first talk. The U.S., I'm going to explain this, has had a historic fear from the founding of the United States of inequality. And it's sort of strange that we are seen as we are the most unequal of the advanced countries, and that we're seen so favorable to it. The Chinese, these are two of the big giants in his little thing of reward development. I just don't know enough about India to say anything there. It's all about threat to social stability. And so that's what they're afraid of. And the leaders of China have said this distinctly. And the Americans, our leaders have not spoken in the same clarity about what the fear is, but I'm going to show you. There's a lot of discussion and some evidence, and I picked one here which I thought was insane. This is that ultimately inequality is going to feed back on the well-being of the majority. And the thing people often focus on is health. And so there was this article in The Guardian on July 7th, look it up, because I sent it off to a science friend of mine who works on centenarians. I mean, they're studying people or creatures that live way beyond, out on the tail of the lifespan, to see what it is about them that can make humans live longer. And so when I sent this to this former student of mine, and I said, I guess you're just doing an evil job, because the Guardian says you're going to produce a race of long-lived billionaires who will squeeze everybody in every possible way. He just said, I got to work in my lab. I said, yeah, keep doing, because we think of this as really benefiting all of us if they discover stuff. There's also, I think, a fear of loss of collective ability to respond to global challenges. That is, we get more and more divided up. It's just harder to have a uniform response. And you see that in the U.S., the vengeance of conservative people with a lot of money, or do not believe, or claim they do not believe in climate change. It's all a plot by a bunch of evil scientists being paid by government money, etc. And that's a serious, thing in the U.S. So, so we then no longer respond. One of the political parties, the Republicans, who have traditionally been pro-science, been a businessman, business people tend to be rational. They have no longer fully rational, I would say, in their responses to this. And then what troubles me, I call the opportunity cost of failure. There's so much science going on. There's so much improvements in technology. There's so many things that people in universities are doing, people in companies are doing. To fail to bring those things out at this moment of history is just awful if we're going to end up in distributional disasters or whatever it is. So those are views. Now I want to give you the way this fits into the American picture, and then I bring some Europeans in too. This is a famous statement by Justice Brandeis. We may have democracy, or may have wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we can't have both. He was a very famous Supreme Court judge. And then I put underneath, so economists who want to see the model, this is a multiple equilibrium model. You can have either this equilibrium, democracy, or you have this equilibrium, which is extreme wealth. And then I said, well, let's see, the Europeans must have something to say about this, and the best statement is by Machiavelli. There was a thing where he says, who has the gold, that means who controls the money, gets to rule, controls the government, and then he who rules gets the gold. And I note that this statement is a dynamics for the model, because that's a differential equation, and you can solve the differential equation. So I wanted to transform these historic statements into things that we would treat as models. And so I called this the Brandeis Machiavelli, the BM model. They didn't write it out this way, and I am not giving you the math for you. You can all do it, in your heads. And then I want to then add another aspect to this. I call this Madison-Adams theory. This is, again, the founders of the U.S. and the fear. James Madison, who's here from Virginia, was perhaps the smartest guy we had in terms of thinking like a social scientist. Really extraordinary. You read him and you just go away going, gee, he really is. So I put in bold what his view of what's going to happen if we have a lot of inequality. And he says, in either case, liberty will be subverted. Liberty made its appearance here in the last talk as part of the three things that were granted. You can't have all three. The American view is you can't have mass inequality, the historic view, and have a lot of inequality and have democracy. So the first, he says, it's possible that it will be a despotism growing out of anarchy. And I think of that as, well, French Revolution kind of stuff, or whatever. People the poor people are rioting all over the place. Maybe this is the kind of thing we have perhaps in the Arab states at the moment. You have just complete. And then the one that I think is more relevant to the advanced countries now is an oligarchy founded on corruption. And the corruption in the U.S. is, what's the correct word? The corruption, right now China, as you may know, is on a big campaign against corruption. We're not quite sure exactly what that means. In the U.S., we have some court decisions that says corruption of certain kind is totally legal, et cetera. You can do things. To the right side is John Adams, second president of the United States. And again, the bold in the bottom he says, in that case, that's with a balance. He talks about real estate because the main capital form in the U.S. was land. The U.S. was a country of farmers. And he says, in that case, the multitude will take care of the liberty, virtue, and interest of the multitude in all acts of government. That's the view that if you have a middle-class society, not too much wide income, the government will, he didn't say median voter or something like that, but you could have phrased it that way. It'll take care of us, and that kind of society is stable. So here you see you have the two views, the fears of Madison, and then he's saying, well, he's not predicting one of the two results from mass inequality, but he's saying here's two possibilities. And here you have Adams on the other side saying, we just keep our thing, the government will be a force positive. So I called that Madison-Adams theory, and then I stuck them together and I have BMMA model, which is meant to just focus our minds as economists, that these statements were not, what's the right word, political nonsense. These guys were really thinking quite seriously about this. Then I almost added another one, but I decided not to do it BMMAE. Dwight Eisenhower in 1961 gave a speech that shocked the Americans at the time. And he was, of course, a great general who played a major. Well, all the soldiers played the bigger role, of course, but he led the soldiers in the World War II. And then it's all about. I just made one change in this. His famous speech was everywhere that he had military-industrial complex that he was worried about. This is when he was leaving the presidency, which meant he felt pressure as president all over the place. For at that point, build up more military weapons, And then the companies who benefited from it, of course, that's their business, they push for it. So I just replaced it to Wall Street and the super wealthy. That's basically my innovation. You go back and see exactly what he said, but it just reflects, I said updated to today's world. I mean, he's concerned about the public discourse being controlled by an ideological communication media, and you see that part of what's, I think, going on. Funding of research by foundations, et cetera, et cetera. And then he says public policy could itself become the captive. I again put in wealthy elite as opposed to military-industrial complex. But you go back and you'll see it. I captured the correct flavor of his talk, and I am sure this was his last address as President of the United States when he was leaving office. So he was warning the country, and I think it would fit very well. Today, modified as I modified. The China fears, just briefly. Those, this was from maybe 4 or 5 months ago. I haven't updated the chart of the map. Those are numbers of strikes in different cities, and they have to be extremely underestimated because they basically, the people are either going through the newspapers, local newspapers in China, they'll report, oh, there's a strike here, there's a strike there. They tend to be very short, but they're all over China, and the workers just have found that they can win things that they cannot win otherwise, they just go out and strike a short period. Those are not led by the Chinese trade unions, which are a government agency, but the Chinese trade unions have slowly been moving, in some provinces at least, to be at least supportive of the workers. They try to mediate, get them their things. And then there's two strikes that the top one it's got world attention in May 2010. It was the Honda strike. And I had students from Sun Yat-sen University send me pictures of the strike. I have a whole collection of pictures of the strike. It was fascinating. And the students sent this to me. I was, oh, that's good. I mean, that's very nice. The second one is one of the strangest strikes, and it's going to touch into what we'll get to at the end here. That's a strike of employees of IBM in China who are protesting the sale. IBM just sold one of its large server manufacturing things. They sold it to Lenovo, which they previously sold to their PC. And Lenovo seems to be a pretty good company as far as I can tell. So it's not that these workers are suddenly losing an IBM job. What were they protesting for? They were protesting, they wanted a share of the capital gains. They didn't quite phrase it that way, but they wanted a part of the sale price. They said, it's our company. We've worked for this. IBM is selling it. IBM is selling it, I don't know, 2 billion, 3 billion, whatever amount of money. We want some of that. And they went out on strike. And then the thing that most blew my mind was, one of my Chinese friends says, look here, it's this sign or whatever it was they were carrying says that's what American workers get when you sell a company. Well, of course, American workers get zero when you sell a company, to merge two companies. I don't get it. If you're a worker, you don't get any profit. And I said, well, that's an interesting belief that they have about the way capitalism operates. That they actually own part of the company because they worked there for however many years they were working there. They did, by the way, get substantial severance pay that they otherwise would not have gotten by doing the strike, etc. So you can see this, the Chinese government has a legitimate sort of, the fears are not made up. They should be nervous that people are willing to go out and strike all throughout China and sometimes over things that seem a little So here's the Chinese government response. First, I quoted Jiang Zemin in 1998 when he sort of first put his finger on this, and he didn't say exactly the certain social and economic problems. And by that, he meant inequality and corruption. They passed some laws designed to strengthen the hands of workers to try to create more stability. Contract labor law, which guarantees contracts to everybody, including the migrant laborers. They now have a law that every workplace is supposed to have a union, with collective bargaining, supposed to have a signed contract. So probably the official Chinese union rate and collective bargaining rate will surpass Sweden's. But most of these will be bogus sort of, unions that are government agencies. And now they've been on this rush to corruption, and you see Chinese officials rush to sell luxury homes. What they did not report in this newspaper, this just a few days ago, is that a lot of them are buying homes in New York, and they're beginning to buy them in Boston. So you see those rent prices going up in a large amount because they want to preserve, in case they're going to be called corrupt. You want to get out of the country fast and have enough money overseas that you can live a good life. So this is sort of problem. Well, one of my friends, Mr. Murdoch, said this model is ridiculous. He's never asked the prime minister for anything. And I don't know, that's what he says. He never got any advantages from his political stuff. And then I had some other friends of mine. The pudgy face was once a very nice undergraduate student who looked very nice. He went to Wall Street. That's him in 20 years after being on Wall Street. He doesn't look the same as he looked when he was an undergraduate student. And the one to the right, that's, you know who he is. And what I quoted here was at the bottom it's James Madison. It's just laying out this, because the model, this is it's a Chicago-ish kind of model, because it just says laws are made for the few, not for the many. And in the conservatives in the U.S. and the libertarians certainly, but even our Tea Party stuff, the sense is that the rich control the government, so we want less government, because if they bailed out the banks with our taxpayers' monies. The bankers are back. Nobody went to jail. Nobody lost much of anything. And now they're paying giant fines, but it's not affecting their share prices very much. So it means that the fines must, etc. I don't know. But that's a response to Mr. Murdoch. So the end, I read this model where the politics interacts with the inequality as giving us, and a whole lot of education, two possible serious equilibriums at this point. Well, one is a science fiction book that scared me when I was a kid, because it was about two old people living at Wall Street in the Empire, not Wall Street, the Empire State Building they were living in, and they were cadavers kept alive like centenarians, and they were controlling all the money in the world. And that's if you read that story, you can download the book now free on the internet because it's out of print for many years. And then to the right is something from Jonathan Swift and H.G. Wells, which also is about it's basically the exact opposite of all these equality of opportunity things. It's just except the family, you have to treat the people living forever as sort of the family living forever, dominating the way you phrase it. And there were some comments in there. To the right is what you go if you go to Silicon Valley, and it's also science fiction now. So Ray Kurzweil has written basically books that he claims are serious, and they are serious, but they're more science fiction than they are science fact. And it has this term, people here, the singularity, that we got the computers improving so much, and I would add we also have the education expanding around the world, more people getting PhDs in science, engineering, knowledge, and the computer things, they just interact to produce potentially great things to benefit all of humanity. So there's the two possibilities phrased in that way. And I've left off the James Madison's other possibility, which is more, I think, what's going on in the Arab countries, but may strike parts of Europe. We will see. And then there's a popular way of phrasing this, and this is going to get to the heart of what my quote solution or the way to change it. It's who owns the robots rules the world, and that means who owns capital. Capital share is rising. The top people tie their income to capital income in the U.S. at least. And workers obviously can benefit if we own part of the capital that replaces us. So if I was a robot here giving this talk, and I don't know, you owned the robot, you would get you're not paying me anything, but you'd get whatever rewards come from doing that. If I owned the robot, I gained the award. So there's a very important thing about having the ownership of capital be spread widely. And the robots captures it because you think of the robot replacing you. Okay. So what can we do? You can imagine a war of labor with capital, and strong unions bringing back, I don't know, the golden ages of the 1950s or 60s. And I said, maybe in the Nordic countries, but not elsewhere. And I doubt that that's, going to have that. And so I have, a guy with a big charter and another guy who's obviously going to lose. You could tax capital and try to redistribute stuff. And that was Henry George favored, taxing land, because land couldn't be moved. You should just tax land, and it's inelastic. You get no loss of supply, etc. But today's capital is very mobile. I'm more dubious of Thomas Piketty's idea. Somewhere we're going to establish a global capital tax. But places that do well, though, do have a special characteristic. In Norway and Alaska, are two examples I know, two places that have not wasted their oil monies at all. And that's because they distribute it to people. They hold it in funds, and then people benefit from it. But the biggest stock of all today, I think, is the knowledge capital, which is very hard to imagine. I suppose I could rent my brain out to somebody, or somebody could buy shares, and it's possible to imagine the shares in then you'd have great things in students, so we'd be able to get buy shares in the young students' future incomes and pay money now, and so on and so forth. But I'm going to push for a more, I think it's more practical, or maybe not, who knows, but this is to increase workers' ownership of capital and capital income. And the capital being not the only contributor to inequalities, but a major part. And that's what the U.S. founders saw. They saw ownership as the solution. I put it in caps here. That was it. There was no discussion of trade unions at that point. We barely had any, working things or other stuff. And so here's again John Adams, second president of the U.S. Acquisition of land, easy to every member of society. Tom Jefferson, cannot invent too many devices for subdividing property. Hamilton, who's considered the more Wall Street-ish kind of guy, same statement there. And then Madison being always more careful and saying, without violating the rights of property, reduce extreme wealth toward mediocrity. So it's got to be done carefully and without breaking the people's property is their property. But some fashion you have to do this. This is what they do. That's why Jefferson went on to the Louisiana Purchase. It was very clear. It was to get more land to give to the Americans, because otherwise we would be, inequality would grow. The U.S. has lots of what we call it inclusive capitalism. We got a lot of profit sharing, much more than Europeans. Gain sharing is profit sharing at a more local level, where it doesn't depend upon corporate profits or firm profits. It can be just, if our group produces, reduces costs in the public sector by a certain amount, we share in that reduction, and that's quite common. We have our 2014 survey is not yet out, so I can't give you the report. And then people own company stock, and people have options. And then I just talked a little bit about these systems. We have something called an employee stock ownership program in the U.S. This is probably slightly outdated, the number of firms, and probably maybe another 500,000 workers. In our country, 40% more workers are part of an employee ownership scheme that are in trade unions in the private sector. That's pretty striking. And I give the market value, and a lot of these closely held family businesses, which also raises some fascinating questions. Most of the evidence, I've been working with two of my colleagues, one economist, one sociologist, for multiple years now, on how well do these companies do.
Are they a viable form, or are they just this funny niche out here of capitalism? And so here I just summarize a whole bunch of studies, all of which say they have a, I'll say modestly, 2 to 3% higher productivity. Not productivity growth, but because the workers are involved, they're as owners, and they do a little bit better. You can get CEOs of companies all over the place who will swear to that their company that operates as well. So I just give the evidence here. The 2007 UK Treasury study was upset me because we were doing a study for the UK, and along came this group. Oxero is some private company that they were given a contract from the Treasury, and they had much better data than we did. And so our paper sort of came to a grinding halt. We said, oh, these guys got really confidential data of all these corporations from the Treasury. It has to be better, but they came to essentially the same conclusion as other people had. And then I'll give some more evidence. This is just referred to studies we have done. They're MBR studies, and one is these worker reports. Most of the studies are based on company records of productivity things. We went and asked workers about what did they do when somebody shirks in their workplace. And we have the people who were paid with these more ownership kind of systems and the people who were not. And of course, the guys who are ownership say, "Hey, you better work. It's my money you're messing with." The other people, okay. And as a matter of fact, if you're a young faculty or a person with tenure, and you're competing for a tenure job, and the guy in the office next to you does very little work, are you happy or sad? Well, you're probably happy because your chances of getting promoted went up. Whereas if two of you were being judged as a team, you're now going to say, hey, get to work. So we've got that kind of thing. And then we have a study that took these great places of work, which are the best places in the country by, this is a Fortune magazine, the 100 places that people most want to work with. And it turned out an incredible fraction of them are employee owned or have other forms of sharing. So that's what we get to this. The creme, this is French, but I think I should have put another sign there, but creme de la creme of worker ownership is British. Anybody, if you lived in London, you know John Lewis is the best retailer. They surpassed Marks and Spencer in sales a few years ago. And they set up the Waitrose supermarket, and they have now become they show the bottom pictures will show you, etc. Showing the earlier version. And Charlie Mayfield is someone when I was in the UK, I did speak with him. He just became head of the John Lewis. And on July 4th, he didn't realize that was American Independence Day, I think. They declared Employee Ownership Day. And I saw this and I said, wow, that's kind of cool. And then he argues why businesses should be owned by their employees. And they really are an extraordinary company. Throughout the recession, they made enough profits that they were giving, the workers were getting £2,000, £3,000 a year bonuses in profit sharing. I mean, they really did extraordinary. Yeah, I've just been lucky, one company, but it's very good. Here are two American companies, Wegmans, which does not have ownership but has profit sharing, and Cisco, which has ownership in the sense of the workers don't own everything. It's very rare they own. John Lewis, they own 100%, but in most places they have a substantial ownership stake, because part of it is incentive, and there they are. Wegmans is usually picked as the #1 grocery store in the United States. #1, and they are 12th in this last year in the being best employer. Now, a grocery chain, that's pretty remarkable, because those are usually low-level workers are usually not for wealth. You often have high school kids at checkout counters in the U.S. and so on. No, this is, etc. Okay. So that's a case that, yeah, there's a viable form of capitalism where workers have a more stake of ownership. And now the question is, how do you get from here to there, which is our current, where we sit now, to a place where workers are more involved in this process. So it sounds like, what do you call it, you know, like your mother or your father saying, you know, be good, don't drink too much, don't drink when you drive the car. So, but these are points that there's a little more depth than just whatever they are. No. It has to be gradual. It has to be consistent with national, if we're going to move related to this, national attitudes and traditions. The U.S. has such an attitude towards workers being their own bosses and worker ownership, that you can get the most right-wing, some of the most right-wing Tea Party guys lined up with left-wing Democrats to be in favor of more worker ownership. That doesn't mean they're willing to vote for certain bills, but it does mean you have a talking place where people, that's our country, that's not other countries. You have to be open to variety and experimentation. What works for Wegmans, which is profit sharing, is not ownership. And if that's what the company and the feels and the workers are happy with that, you don't want to mess with that. Let them do it their way. It has to be supported by people, etc. And then the real tough point, at least in the US, is these ESOPs have been given some tax breaks. Let's be honest. The government is greasing the wheels for worker-owned enterprises. And that's how they got to be 10 million or 11 million things. And it's been stable because we haven't done much with the tax breaks in the last 20, 30 years. And so there is discussion of how much extra tax break might you want to give if you wanted to expand this further. And then that there'll be the Wall Street lawyers and guys are going to find loopholes, in every possible way. Mrs. Thatcher tried, profit sharing scheme, and the Brits have also tried a number of these things, less successful than the Americans for reasons I don't fully understand, except for John Lewis, which is the best. But the minute you put a profit sharing in, and I'm paying you some money, now the trick is I'm not, and I got some tax break on the profit sharing part. Next year you're not going to get a pay increase, and you'll get extra shares, whereas you would have gotten it in the thing. I'm just basically ripping off the treasury. So there's all kinds of stuff. We've had discussions with various characters. Larry Summers seems to be most concerned about this, and my answer to him usually is, I said, well, how much of the tax breaks do we give on R&D? Which everybody loves that. How much, you don't think companies aren't shifting over resources to R&D so somebody who's working half-time for the R&D director and half-time for the either marketing director, he or she will suddenly be all on the R&D budget. Nobody's going to say anything. You have to have that, but you obviously want to minimize it. So I have a set of reforms for the U.S. that are, I think, fit, and then I'll talk a little bit about Sweden. Interesting. And again, I'm really good. We propose, and it may go into the next Democratic Party platform, but who knows? Could go into the Republican platform also. Unfortunately, they're so at odds with each other. If one of them put it in, the other one would probably denounce it as some evil plot. So you have a very strange situation. So what was to give them preferred treatment in government procurement programs? If you think that democracy will do better in the future with workers having a greater stake and less inequality, okay, you have IBM comes in with a thing for you. We currently have special advantages for small companies. You just say, okay, if it's a worker-owned company or has profit sharing or whatever it is that the company's doing, you make clear, you give them a little edge. We give little edges to minority-headed companies, It's to add something to this. Just to have put some money down for state centers. We have some states are doing things. It'd be nice to get a lot more states involved in spreading information and so on. It's a big country, and there are lots of places. I'll leave the leavers out. But it's got to be brought in. But I'm not going to talk about it. There's things to change the governance of pension funds, because pension funds money basically goes to Wall Street, and Wall Street guys run it. And that's happening because nowadays the pension funds realize that their manager of their pension things, who claims to be able to beat Wall Street, that nobody really beats the market, and it's better to have an indexed fund of everything, and that gets them out. But then the question is, do you use that money to push corporations to particular policies that you're now the owner? You have a right to do that. And then the tax incentives, spreading those, some discussion. And there's a particular part of the Internal Revenue Code that we would like to see change. We think it'll have a big effect. All very U.S. Special, kind of things that fit with the Americans. So none of this would fit for Britain. Britain's copied some of the stuff from us, but we have never copied the John Lewis thing from the Brits, which is interesting, which is very successful. The Brits haven't copied the John Lewis either, particularly, so that raises an interesting question. Now for your Sweden went down this route with the wage earner funds, or something like this route. And so I did a bit of review of this and talked to my friends. I was in Norway this weekend, talked to my friends in Norway about, what do you know about this, So this was Meidner's fund, which accomplished, according to Jonas Pontusson and Suresh Kuruvella, many years ago, said, achieved nothing, basically. And was generally viewed as a failure by LO and by everybody else. It's not a success. What was it? And this is now partially my reading and partially other people. It's basically anti-incentive. The profit-sharing funds of the company are meant to bring the worker and as a partial owner of the profit stream. This was a profit tax that goes into an outside fund. So to me, there's no reason why I should work harder for my company to make more profits when some fraction of it is going into this outside union-controlled fund. And so I said it was designed to break the link between workers and their firm's profits. And that was part of the wage solidarity program of LO and the Social Democrats. So it was my reading of Meidner first. I've been reading some of his earlier things, at least the ones in English. And it looks like, yeah, this was meant to strengthen this leveling of the wages. And it really goes against, I called it anti-incentive. So companies aren't going to want this. It was presented as a highly politicized change rather than a gradual something that we're going to experiment with because we think inequality is a great danger. It was presented at a time when there was no specter of inequality. So the idea that you should spend a lot of resources to do this didn't seem to have much push, including among many of the union people, etc. And then it had some very weird process to get the local workers in. They would sit on the boards and they could direct, let's say, the shares in their company. But they didn't own the shares. And I compared this to Drucker's thing with pension funds, it's called the socialism, was all the workers, we all have pension funds, we have to use them actively to do this. This was, you have a general fund, and it's taken from your company, and now the workers in the company can say how they're going to vote the shares when they don't own the shares. It just doesn't have the right flavor, just as an economic institution. Then a few days ago, I was sitting in the offices of Skanska and learning about their green policies. And I just happened, this is totally by chance. A guy gives me, he says, well, you got to see our annual report. And I said, oh, you know, it's a 200-page thing. And I just happened to leaf through it while he was on the telephone for a minute. The business guy was singing me, and I stopped at this page, 167. And I said, ooh, you have an employee ownership program. And it was first introduced in 2008, but just has been changed. You tinker with these programs, and read about this. And I said, ooh, first the question I ask is everybody covered in the ownership, or is this only for the top executives? Nope, it covers three kinds of people. Employees, normal workers, key employees, which would be technical specialists, you know, high-level people, but not managers, and then executives who get the best deal. This is a stock purchase plan, which many companies have in the advanced countries. And I've actually studied these plans, and I work with a particular company in London, in their London office, trying to find ways to get more workers to participate in the plans. Generally speaking, they operate where you put some of your worker money down, and then they will match you there's different kinds of rules. So if I buy 2 shares of Harvard University, maybe if the rule says, gives me 1 share up to a certain amount. And you quickly do the calculations on those. They're good deals. And, you know, obviously, if the shares go to 0, you lost your money. So you're taking some risk, but they're geared up, so they're generally good deals. And we found that a lot of companies, maybe 40% of workers get involved, a lot of workers don't. And usually it's the lower income workers who don't have the cash to do it, etc. Well, the Skanska plan was voted, or not voted, excuse me, chosen by the Global Equity Organization as a group of, it's a business group that is for expanding ownership all around in major companies. And they have a fairly big presence in Europe, and they gave Skanska a best plan effectiveness. I thought that was great, because that meant that I could tell you the plan is really good without going through the details that you know, which you have to go through, and not having really studied it. But they also have a problem. It turns out a lot of the blue-collar workers, I'll say blue-collar, lower-paid people, maybe it's lower-paid clerks. I was very careful to ask. There were 2 ladies, when you walk into company headquarters, there are 2 ladies who stand there, they're sitting behind a thing, and they give you a badge, and they do all the kind of stuff to tell you where to go. And I said, are they included in the plan? And the executive said to me, yes, they are, yes. And I said, okay, that's great. But we didn't know whether they actually took some money and got involved in the plan. They also give some free shares, and I think this is why I got this lesson. If your group performance is high, you get some just shares. So, and I'm not sure how they would judge the group performance of those ladies doing that process. But so that's probably why I got this best award, because it had a sense of, it isn't just your money, it's just work hard and we're going to give you some of these shares for free up to a certain amount. But then I went back and I said, what is strange about this? Here in Sweden, where everybody's supposed to be, many people in favor of more egalitarian stuff, and when you read some of the details, it was pretty clear the executives were getting a better ride on the plans. So an average worker would get 1 share free, executives might get 5 shares for the same thing. And I said, no, shouldn't. Now here I just said the unions should bargain for a more progressive share ownership scheme. This is the kind of scheme, it seems to me, that is much better than the old wage earners stuff. And companies want this kind of stuff. And so tinkering with it to represent the workers' views and move it a little more, you know, and because I said these companies, they want, they feel, because people will, they know turnover is lower if you commit to the plan. People will work harder. You know, 2%, whatever the number is of the productivity gain, They are committed to it. So I said that would be a good thing for the LO to pick up on. Now we have the coup de resistance of this. It's French also. Have anybody here heard about the market basket dispute in the U.S.? It's the biggest labor dispute we have had in, say, in my lifetime. I've never seen a dispute like this before. The market basket is a family-owned grocery. It's rated number 6 in terms of quality. So Wegmans, the one I told you about before, is number 1 always. They're just extraordinary. They're the John Lewis, but done with with profit sharing. The business model of this particular grocery is profit sharing, big profit sharing. They pay pretty high wages, so they're clearly not, giving you profit shares instead of wages. The workers do it, and they are rated as literally the cheapest major grocery in the New England area. By one, I said by one industry group. There may be somebody else in some other rating, but they're clearly a low price place. And they locate low and middle income neighborhoods. They have 25,000 employees, $4 billion in revenues. You go walk by the grocery store. I don't actually shop in that grocery store. It's not in Brookline. It's a little more upper income area, and we have different set of grocery stores. And they suddenly was an explosion 6 weeks ago of this in this company. They're non-union, and they made the most successful worker protest that you could imagine. So here's a little history of this, but I'll just read it quickly. It was owned by a Greek-American family that had some serious family disputes, including some things that should have put some of the family members in jail. I mean, there was once there were two sides of the family, each wanted to control this. There was one party was setting up sort of other corporations where money was being funneled through. So and it ended up they had to stop that as they one ripped the other off. And the court came in, and so the two of them have just about 1/2 of the ownership. Arthur T. is the hero in this saga, and he was CEO of the company, and he's devoted to the workers. They love him, as you'll see in a minute. The most beloved, has to be the most beloved, wealthy CEO anywhere in the world. You can't match this. And he had a tiny majority because one cousin, he had 50.5, and then this one cousin suddenly decided to join the other side of the thing, which was the group that said, "What the hell's going on here? Why don't we just declare huge dividends for the family? And to hell with this. So they a year ago in August, they basically raided the profit pool, and when they had this shift, and they got large, a quarter of $1 billion suddenly distributed as dividends. All the owners are members of the family. So totally family-owned industry. This year they were, who knows? I don't know but I'm sure there'll be many books written on this. They suddenly fired Arthur T, having tolerated him, and his cousin is Arthur S. So the two Arthurs fighting over this. What happened? First of all, senior manager says they're not reporting to the new CEO. They refuse. That the company's run really well and everybody's got the number. Then the 8 senior managers got fired right after that. At which point the entire company, no unions involved, mind you, went on literally on strike. They were smarter than going on strike. They would show up for work, but the people who delivered food to the warehouses didn't deliver. And eventually suppliers, who also found the company a great company to deal with farmers, refused to sell them stuff. And so that's a picture of about a week ago of what they had for offering. Then the customers who liked the store and felt it was a really great store, and I'm sure I go back to Boston. I will go out of my way to buy something just to see what the experience is like. And then when you go to John Lewis in London, you just are amazed at how the staff is A, knowledgeable, and B, is actually seems to want to help you. They're not, people who are going to make some money and that's the only reason I'm here. Well, they have a share. So we had this giant thing. The giant dispute, and nobody knew how it was going to end. The company didn't want to lay off full-time workers because then so the whole company might just crash. They did lay off part-timers. They threatened more firings. They held a job fair, which was widely publicized throughout New England, to people to take the jobs of the recalcitrant workers. And almost nobody showed up. Meaning the whole community said nope on this. So, etc. Our governor, who's supposed to be a liberal Democrat, he basically told the workers, go back to work and let the owners fight their battle. Meaning you're not part of this because you don't have shares. And they did, because the only pressure that the fired CEO had on his thing was that the workers were not going to work for the successor managers. And so, 3 days ago, 3 or 4 days ago, I'm slightly confused, the headline was, he bought it. They agreed to sell him the store. That's a picture from Labor Day News in Boston of the workers listening to him give a TV announcement of the victory. I bought this. And the looks on their faces, we've seen now over the last 6 weeks. It's absolutely clear that workers idolize this guy. The signs were always, bring back our CEO. I think every CEO in the world should want to have that sense of the workers. Yeah, bring back our CEO. We're not working without him because he's the guy who makes the company run and who does it in this great way. Now, the scary part is he had to borrowed $1.6 billion from some Wall Street, firms. He's going to be in charge of a company that has lots of debts to pay. Some of the profits are going to have to go to paying off the debts, and I don't know what his long-term plan is. But this was, the quote here was awesome for given that I started off with the American Revolution guys. This was the biggest day since we defeated the Redcoats in the Revolutionary War. It was a huge, huge thing. And you just Google market basket, and you will just see all over the story after story. You get the videos you'll see. So it's a giant event. And as one person said, it's going to be taught in every single MBA class. It'll be taught every MBA curriculum. I mean, there'll be a case study, a case of this. And it may fail in the end because I say it's very indebted. And he may not be able to run the company the way he did before as a family-owned business, where the family said, his part of the family said, we got enough money, let's have the profit sharing and let's do this in the water perspective. Okay, so now there's a whole lot of discussion in the US. And one of the lessons of this, I phrased it for reducing inequality. Some people are phrasing it as, what are the lessons for increasing worker power? Let me just say, I called up, and the dispute started 6 weeks ago, and I called up a person I know very well, the AFL-CIO. I said, could you please send some people to help this group, these workers and customers? And they said, no, we're too busy. I said, what do you mean you're too busy to help workers? They're not our members. They're all pay dues. They're not union. And we got to work for the Democrats to win the next election. So our unions, I thought, hopeless. Just don't even now don't understand that they have to stretch a lot. So here's just a set of questions. Is it going to cause more employee activism elsewhere? And manager activism. Key thing being the managers view themselves as with the workers. U.S. labor law has this sharp division. Once you're a supervisor, you are legally cannot be part of the union, and you you can be fired immediately if you don't do what top management tells you. You have no legal rights in that sense. That was, I think, a very smart thing if you wanted to control the companies and keep the workers, because the supervisors often will be the natural leaders of the workers. And here they, without a union, they did, and they were fired immediately by the company. We have something called a B corporation, benefit corporations. It's corporations in their charter are said that they can do things for social good, not necessarily for profits. Now, for them, we don't know how they're operating. It just started 2 years, 3 years, maybe it's 4 years ago, 2010, 2011, and we'll see how they operate. And then I just think of these governments and International Economic Agency. You have the IMF, Christine Lagarde, said that inequality is a terrible thing. She's been making all these statements until they found out whatever shenanigans she was doing with crony capitalist kind of deals. The OECD has had these incredible statements. They have no, as far as I can see, they have no policy to do anything. So I said, boy, they could start moving in this direction. Here, let's see them start thinking, what's the best way to do this? They can bring in Skanska to tell them how they do it or something, or John Lewis, etc. And the conclusion is I want to put the big thing on this ownership. Because equity in English has two meanings. And in this group, equity has meant fairness. But equity is also ownership. And in English, it's the same, the word has this dual meaning. And so I think if we're going to defeat the specter, that inequality going, we got to find a way to combine the two meanings. It can't be war of capital against labor. It can't be the type of funds that the LO pushed a long time ago, which was had the flaws laid out. And so I did the natural thing. This is a book that was written by me and two colleagues, just laying out the American history and all of the evidence that these companies work where they are. Doesn't necessarily mean, obviously, they'll work to expand this ownership thing to other companies. That's the kind of open question, but you have to push and see whether other companies can also. And these are all the presidents and characters. So I asked them, what did you guys think of this? And they said, oh yeah, go for it. Because we've seen the BNNA model says if you don't do this, you are going to lose your democracy, and that this cures part of the inequality problem. That's the other part of it. Okay, that's fine. I'll turn it off. I'll leave it there.
Leave it up there.
Yeah.
Second keynote address to be held by Richard B. Freeman. So Richard holds the Herbert Ascherman Chair in Economics at Harvard University. He is also involved in different positions at many other institutions, such as the Harvard Law School, the London School of Economics, the NBER, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and the US National Academy of Science. He has won several important awards and is generally regarded as one of the world's leading labor economists, but he has also made important contributions to the fields of the economics of science and engineering. He's been immensely productive. He has written at least 18 books, edited 23 others, and published over 300 articles. So please join me in welcoming Richard B. Freeman to the podium.
Thank you. some of that Franco gave, and I knew he would without ever conversing with him, gave some of the facts that I'll just quickly just go through. Then I want to talk about the fears. Why is this inequality seen as a specter that's haunting us? When if you go back 40 years ago, you would have said, gee, not every country, but many countries would have said, we need more inequality because it'll give us more incentives for efforts and so on. So it's been a tremendous change. I'm going to offer two very peculiar, interesting models, and you'll see what they are. And then talk a little bit about better futures and roadmaps and some other recent things that have been happening in this. Well, the facts, this is Branko's talk at the beginning, the inequality rising within countries. I just would emphasize part of that is that the informal and irregular work persists in most countries. So that has a certain labor market dimension, and that capital's share of income has risen. In China as among other places, in pretty much most of the countries. And then across the countries, conditional on the PPPs or influenced by the PPPs or something, we have seen the income inequality falls among people, and he said that. I also would just add one additional thing that I think is quite important, is we're seeing the spread of higher education to all the major developing countries in a huge way. And that also is a movement towards equality of people. China, of course, is graduated last year, lower than that. This is 2014 as of the spring. The US had 492, which puts us number one. We had 8 of the top 10, so we're feeling really good about our performance in this contest. The net worth. Number 2 was China. That's pretty striking, and any of the income inequality Gini coefficients that the Chinese officially have are inconsistent with this level of billionaire status. Russia. The EU would be second if you were one country, and that again connects to what Branko in this morning laid out about how as more countries join the EU. You see this, and then I just said, Sweden. How many are there in Sweden? And that was 19. I was somewhat surprised that number of billionaires given the Sweden with tax rates that have declined and so on. And include the number 12. You might know who he is. I've forgotten his name, but it wasn't he. And so there are people who cheer for that. On this machine that at hand is not moving, it's supposed to move and go clap, 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 clap. It's not clapping right now. Okay, so we've got this massive shift of income distribution that they say, well, should we worry? Should we not? If the American income distribution, it's the upper 0.1%. Let's just give the little figures here. That's huge. Just literally fourfold increase over 40 years. Then you look within the upper 0.01%, and then you look at the upper 0.001%. I got some figures here. There's some sort of a TV show. See how the top 0.001% live. And they then have a number that seems erroneous, but who knows? They claim there were over 1,000 American billionaires. The figures that Forbes publishes gives us less, but no one's quite sure how Forbes, how do you know the hidden wealth, which is what Branko referred to, and how they're valuing different things. So I just give some, these are now published from the U.S. Internal Revenue Service, the top 400 U.S. taxpayers. They get 1.59%, 10% of capital gains. So we know that these people are really heavy into ownership. That's how you get to be this billionaire. And then, so that's just published figures you can get from the IRS puts that out. So that when we think about the inequality, it's really been concentrated in an extremely small number of people. I mean, the upper 10% is better than the other people and so on. But within every group you see, it becomes more and more. So this is the count of billionaires. 6 million bachelor's graduates of varying quality, but China graduates inside China, not people getting educated in the West. Inside China, more PhDs than any other country. The US has been the leader in that. Again, varying quality. India has had a huge increase in university education, but we tend to ignore it because it's dwarfed by what China did. And if you eliminated China, the Indian thing would be one of the miracles of growing higher education as well. And Brazil has been very good too. So this reduction of inequality worldwide occurs not just in the income statistics, GDP things, but also in education. I just want to make a comment as to where much of this wealth or inequality comes. So you will remember the protests in the US, which certainly in our country sort of focused people. Oh my goodness. It was the upper 1%, over there, and then it's the self-proclaimed 99%. I get contacts from the Occupy Wall Street people. That group was very well educated. Many of them made good money on Wall Street. And then they go into protest things, and they're all having, as far as I can, this one's contacted me, are having pretty good careers as it is moving. They're not really part of the 99% in some deep sense. But I just want to point out, if you